technique of morality by battle, would assume those desires, feelings, and impulses in the soul which are called evil seem to thrive on resistance because resistance belongs to their own nature, and as Buddha said, hatred ceases not by hatred alone, hatred ceases but by love. This seems reasonable enough when applied to persons, but somehow we find it difficult to believe that the impulse of hate can only be overcome by loving it. But as with fear, the hate of hatred is only adding one hate to another, and its results are as contrary as those of the war which was fought to end war. And yet, if you take a gun and shoot a murderer, the result seems to be clear and satisfactory. A dangerous person who might have killed innocent and defenseless people had ceased to exist. Should it not be equally satisfactory when by violence we remove evil from our minds? It is thereby ceases to exist. Why should we question the means used to remove it? Today, this is not quite so much of a problem as it was to some of our ancestors. For now, there is a general inclination to regard as evil only the more extreme vices, which made the hearts of normal men a little troubled. Many things that Puritans would have called deadly sins are now either natural or positively healthy, but the problem still exists because Satan has assumed a new form. He cannot terrify and ensnare us so thoroughly as of old with our own fleshly desires. So he has shifted the emphasis of evil to pain, disease, war, and insecurity. Adversaries which we now fight and hate as much as our ancestors fought and hated incontinence, gambling, drunkenness, and irreligion. In one way, Satan has the better of us, because whereas our ancestors recognized the evil as something existing inside themselves, something for which each man has personal responsibility, we tend to externalize it and make nature or other people responsible. No one, unless a Christian Scientist, need shame himself because of pain and disease. War is the fault, conveniently enough, of Nazis, fascists, or communists, and insecurity of an economic system. If Alan Watts was alive today, oh my God, he would chastise AOC, he would chastise the Squad, he would chastise the neo-Marxists. But, you know, in terms of criticizing the Federal Reserve, I don't think Alan Watts ever even did that. I think his understanding was pretty much relegated and limited to that of religious teachings and religious doctrine, religious documents. But he knew very little about what's called seigniorage. Do you know what seigniorage is? I bet you $100 you can't tell me what seigniorage is in one sentence or less. This book is called Dropping Ashes on the Buddha, the teaching of Zen Master Sang San, compiled and edited by Stephen Mitchell. Can you see your eyes? One evening after a Dharma talk at the Boston Dharma Dhatu, a student asked Sung Sang Son Sa, what is the difference between Shikantatsa, only sitting, and Kong, and practice? Swansa said, when I was in Los Angeles last month, many people asked me about the difference between Soto and Rinzai Zen. I answered they are the same, only the externals are different. Soto uses awareness of breathing to cut off thinking. Kong An Zen uses Kong An to cut off thinking. Only this method is different. Cutting off thinking and becoming a clear mind is the same. They are two doors into the same room. If I am attached to Shikantatsa or to Kong An, then they are different. But if I am not attached, then they are the same. The student said, sometimes you hear of people struggling with Kong Ans for years. Yes, that bothers me. The implication is that either they're on the wrong path or it takes all their time to realize you shouldn't struggle at all. Are you saying there shouldn't be a struggle? So and Sa said keeping the mind that desires enlightenment is the wrong way to use the Kong An. Only keep the great question. The great question means cutting off all thinking, becoming empty mind. So the mind that keeps the great question is enlightenment. You are already enlightened, but you don't know it. So after much hard training, this is enlightenment. It is very easy. Can you see your eyes? No. You have no eyes? You have eyes. Can you grasp your mind? No. You have no mind? It is the same. Can you see this cup? Can you hear my voice? Yes. This is your mind. My eyes can't see my eyes. To try to see my eyes is the wrong way. My mind can't understand my mind. So to try to understand my mind is the wrong way. If you cut off this mind, you will soon attain enlightenment. I can see this cup, so I have eyes. I can hear this sound, so I have mind. What am I? I am asking I. So there are no opposites. Having no opposites is the absolute. So all thinking is cut off. Only don't know, only empty mind. This is my true self. It is very easy. All right, now we're going to read Zen Classics, another book by R.H. Blythe, The Great Masters. Sengtan and the Sin Ming. The Sin Ming Japanese Shinjinmai is one of the first treatises on Zen, at least of those that remain to us. The author of this Buddhist hymn, Sengsan Sosan, the third Chinese Zen patriarch from Dharma, the first Chinese and 28th Indian Zen patriarch, lived during the 6th century, dying in 606 AD. Very little is known of him except that he also seems to have suffered persecution. However, his Sin Ming shows a less truculent attitude and is in fact the most charming of all specifically Zen writings until we come to those of Dr. Sutsuki Daisetsu. The conversion of Sengsan at the hands of Huaiki Eka, the second patriarch, is recorded in the Shuang Tenglu Dentoruku. Sengsan asked Huaiki, saying, I am diseased. I implore you to cleanse me of my sin. Huaiki said, bring me your sin and I will cleanse you of it. Sengsan thought a while, then said, I cannot get at it. Huaiki replied, then I have cleansed you of it. Sengsan realized not simply in his mind, but in every bone of his body that his sinfulness was an illusion, one with that of the illusion of self. As soon as we are aware of our irresponsibility, all the cause of misbehavior disappears insofar as the case, the illusion of self is removed. If we have no self, it cannot commit sin, yet it must be added. I can't see how you and I, who don't exist, should get to speaking here and smoke our pipes for all the world like reality. Robert L. Stevenson Fables. And from another point of view, our self is a real entity, real insofar as we know physically that, as Uema said, your illness is my illness. When one part of the body is diseased, all is diseased. For we are members of one another. In this sense, there is no rest of any one of us, still less for God himself, while one restless soul remains, but the real rest of God, the rest of the man who has arrived, is something much deeper than this, which no simile or metaphor can express, lying as it does essential in the restlessness itself. To go back to Sengsan, he became the disciple of the second patriarch, and practiced austerities, and led a life of devotion and poverty, receiving the bowl in the robe, insignia of the transmission through Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of China of the Buddha mind. At this time, one of the periodic persecutions of Buddhism broke out. Sutras and images were burned wholesale. Monks and nuns were returned to the lay life. Sengsan wandered for 15 years all over the country, avoiding persecution. In 592, he met Taosin Doshin, who became the fourth patriarch. His enlightenment was as follows. Daoshin came and bowed to Sengsan and said, I ask you for your merciful teaching. Please show me how to be released. Sengsan answered, who has bound you? No one, he replied. Sengsan said, why then do you ask to be released? Daoshin immediately came to a profound realization. Xuan Tenglu 3. The title of the work may be explained in the following way. Sin Shin is faith, not in the Christian sense of a bold flight of the soul towards God, a belief in which is unseen because of what is seen, but a belief in that which has been experienced, knowledge, conviction. Sin-shin, the mind, is not a mind in the ordinary sense, but the Buddha nature which each of us has unbeknownst to us. Ming-mai is a recording for the benefit of others. Title thus means a description of that part of oneself where no doubt is possible. This is the same unshakable conviction that Shelley and Beethoven and Guangwin had. They too recorded what they saw with their eyes and heard with their ears, where no hesitation or indecision could enter. Especially noteworthy is the absolute faith in the value of the apparently trivial. It consists of 146 unrhymed lines, 4 characters a line, shorter than the general run of Chinese verse, which usually is 5 or 7. Perhaps the brevity suits the mood of Zen and prevents any literary or rhetorical flourishes. There have been many commentaries on the Siming, the first perhaps being Chu Myon, who quotes the Cheng Tao Ke Shao Doka in illustration. This Sheng Tao Ke appeared 100 years later than the Sinming by Yongchi Yoka Daishi, one of the chief disciples of Huineng, the sixth patriarch. It is 3 times as long and more flowery in style, the Sinming inscribed on the believing mind. All right, here's the verse. There is nothing difficult about the great way, but avoid choosing only when you neither love nor hate. It has appeared in all clarity, a hair's breadth of deviation from it, and a deep gulf is set between heaven and earth. If you want to get hold of what it looks like, do not be anti or pro anything. The conflict of lounging and loathing, this is the disease of the mind, not knowing the profound meaning of things. We disturb our original peace of mind to no purpose, perfect like great space. The way has nothing lacking, nothing in excess, truly. Because of our accepting and rejecting, we have not the suchness of things, neither follow after nor dwell with the doctrine of the void. If the mind is at peace, these wrong views disappear of themselves. When activity is stopped and passivity obtains, this passivity again is a state of activity remaining in movement or quiescence. Editor's note, R.H. Blythe's commentaries on the Sinming occupy 50 pages, far exceed the space available here. I shall therefore quote the treatise in its entirety in Blythe's translation, and will have to choose some of the remarks, regretfully leaving out the others, all worth pondering. How shall we know the one? Not thoroughly understanding the unity of the way. Both activity and quiescence are failures. If you get rid of phenomena, all things are lost. If you follow after the void, you turn your back on the selflessness of things. The more talking and thinking, the farther from the truth. Cutting off all speech or thought, there is nowhere that you cannot go. Returning to the root, we get the essence. Following after appearances, we lose the spirit. If for only a moment we see within, we have surpassed the emptiness of things. Changes that go on in this emptiness all arise because of our ignorance. We do not seek for the truth, religiously avoid following it. If there is the slightest trace of this and that, the mind is lost in a maze of complexity. Duality arises from unity, but do not be attached to this unity. When the mind is one, nothing happens. Everything in the world is unblameable. If things are unblamed, they cease to exist. If nothing happens, there is no mind. When nothing ceases to exist, the mind follows them. When the mind vanishes, things also follow it. Things are things because of the mind. The mind is the mind because of things. If you wish to know what these two are, they are originally one emptiness. In this void, both mind and things are one, of the myriad phenomena contained in both. If you do not distinguish refined and coarse, how can you be for this and against that? The activity of the great way is vast. It is neither easy nor difficult. Small views are full of foxy fears, the faster, slower. When we attach ourselves to the idea of enlightenment, we lose our balance. We infallibly enter the crooked way. When we are not attached to anything, all things are as they are. With activity, there is no going or staying. Obeying our nature, we are in accord with the way, wandering freely without annoyance. When our thinking is tied, it turns from the truth. It is dark, submerged, wrong. It is foolish to entertain the mind. Why shun this and be friends with that? If you wish to travel in the true vehicle, do not dislike the 6 dusts. Indeed, not hating the 6 dusts, it is identical with real enlightenment. The wise man does nothing, the fool shackles himself, the truth has no distinctions. These come from our foolish clinging to this and that, seeking the mind with the mind. Is not this the greatest of all mistakes? Illusion produces rest and motion, illumination destroys liking and disliking. All these pairs of opposites are created by our own folly, dreams, delusions, flowers and air of air. Why are we so anxious to have them in our grasp? Profit and loss, right and wrong, away with them once and for all. If the eye does not sleep, or dreaming ceases naturally. If the mind makes no discriminations, all things are as they really are. In the deep mystery of this, things are as they are. We are released from our relations to them when all things are seen with equal mind. They return to their nature. No description by analogy is possible of this state where all relations have ceased. When we stop movement, there is no movement. When we stop resting, there is no rest. When both cease to be, how can the unity subsist? Things are ultimately in their finality, subject to no law. For the accordant mind in its unity, individual activity ceases. All doubts are cleared up. True faith is confirmed, nothing remains behind. There is not anything we must remember. Empty, lucid, self-illuminated, with no overexertion of the power of the mind. This is where thought is useless. This is what knowledge cannot fathom. In the world of reality, there is no self, no other than self. Should you desire immediate correspondence with this reality, all that can be said is no duality. When there is no duality, all things are one. There is nothing that is not included. The enlightened of all times and places have all entered into this truth. Truth cannot be increased or decreased. An instantaneous thought lasts a myriad years. There is no here, no there. Infinity is before our eyes. The infinitely small is as large as the infinitely great, for limits are non-existent things. The infinitely large is as small as the infinitely minute. No eye can see the boundaries. What is not, what is not, what is not is. Until you have grasped this fact, your position is simply untenable. One thing is all things are one thing. If this is for you, there is no need to worry about perfect knowledge. The believing mind is not dual. What is dual is not the believing mind beyond all.